automobile, bespoke suit. Our victim was a man of means, Julia.
So what was he doing in this part of town?
I don't know. How long has he been dead?
Well, rigorous past, so more than a day, I'd hazard. And the vomit on his jacket is quite dry. William, there's intradermal bruising on his right temple, as though he was leaning heavily on it before he died.
The right temple. That seems odd, given that he's in the driver's seat. Julia, I don't think our victim came here voluntarily. I believe someone may have driven him here.
Moved his body into the driver's seat. He died 36 to 48 hours ago, perhaps longer.
Vehicle was registered to an Edward McInnes, owner of McInnes Biscuits. His wife reported him missing 2 days ago. Do we have a cause of death yet?
We're going to test for poisons. Miss James is bottling Mr. McInnes in readiness.
Oh, I see.
Don't worry, Detective. We'll try to put everything back in the right place.
I'm sure his wife will appreciate that. I'll wager you're eager to get started. I won't keep you ladies. Good day.
Did I upset the detective?
Not at all. He never did get the hang of morgue humor. You, on the other hand, are a quick study. What do we have here? A young woman fished out of the river early this morning.
Oh, no.
What is it, Miss James?
No, it can't be.
You know her.
It's Sarah. Sarah Franklin. She's at the medical college 2 years above me.
I'm so sorry.
Dear God, how could this happen? Are you sure, Doctor?
I can't find any evidence of wrongdoing. I'm going to record a death by drowning, but I believe Miss Franklin took her own life.
That's not possible.
I realize it's not what you want to hear, but it is consistent with the police report. Her shawl was folded nearby. There were stones in her pocket. The railing on the footbridge wasn't broken. It seems she climbed over and threw herself into the water.
Or she was thrown over.
There was no evidence of a struggle.
But Sarah had no reason to take her own life, Dr. Ogden. She was about to graduate. She just received a research scholarship. She was so excited about her future. There was no water in her stomach. How can you explain that?
It could have been forced into the intestines by peristalsis, especially if she had an empty stomach and drowned slowly. Miss James, this must be a terrible shock. I'm so sorry.
Yes. My husband was wearing this suit when he left the house.
Tuesday evening?
It was the last time I saw him.
Had your husband encountered any problems of late? At work, perhaps?
No. Edward was an astute businessman and very well liked. He was never anything but a good provider.
Mrs. McInnes, if I may ask...
Edward and I were betrothed at a very young age. We raised our children in a Christian household. We were always courteous to one another, but our marriage was no love match.
I see.
Some years ago, Edward took his first mistress, something I accepted. It seemed easier than being required to be a wife in that regard. Does that answer your question?
Thank you for your candor. Do you recall anything unusual prior to his disappearance?
Not that I remember. Though a woman did call at the house the same day I reported Edward missing, she was anxious to speak to him.
Who was she?
I don't know. She was distraught, but not enough to leave her name.
Thank you, Mrs. McInnes. If there's anything else, I will contact you.
Should you wish to speak to my husband's current mistress, her name is Lucy Stone. I believe he had installed her in a flat above a milliner's on Young Street.
So his wife knows where I live.
She does.
I bet she didn't shed a tear over Edward being dead.
It seems they had an agreement.
Yes. It was something his wife arranged. But that's all in the past now. Poor Eddie.
When did your relationship begin?
Nearly 2 years ago. And we were happy to, no matter what his wife might tell you. We saw each other as much as we could, but with his responsibilities.
Did you see him the night of his death?
No.
Why was that?
Well, truth be told, Detective, he stopped visiting 3 months ago.
Did he give you a reason?
He found another girl, I suppose. Still, he was honorable enough to keep paying my rent and sending me a little something. I know I won't be much welcome at his funeral, but I would very much like to see him one more time.
I can arrange that, Miss Stone.
Thank you.
I just can't accept that Sarah would kill herself. We opened her up and there was no water in her stomach. I don't understand how you can drown and have no water in your stomach.
Well, any wrongdoing and your doctor would have figured that out. You say she's shocked.
She is, but maybe she made a mistake.
You know, I still can't fathom this, Becca. Cutting open dead people.
I just took out a man's liver and put it in a bottle. Then I did his kidney and his spleen. How's that for a morning's work?
Disgusting.
I've got used to it. I just eat body bits now. We all have them.
We do. And they don't belong in jars. That's plain unholy. I don't know, maybe your friend.
Sarah.
Could be she had things going on she didn't talk about. Things she took to the grave. Why not let her rest in peace, Becca?
You're wrong. But I don't have time to argue with you. I have to get to the school.
Well, argue with me at the church social. You are coming, aren't you?
Yes. I got roped into borrowing chairs from the school for it.
Well, I'll get a wagon, give you a hand.
You will?
Come on, Becca, that was your plan all along.
Well, yes, it was.
Make sure you don't crash up that thing.
Don't worry, I won't.
For centuries, we have lived in darkness. But no more. We are throwing off the cloak of ignorance, ladies. A year ago, a microbiologist, Dr. David Bruce, found parasites in the blood of a European man suffering from, of all things, African sleeping sickness. Formal name, anyone? Yes, Miss Roy.
African trypanosomiasis.
Thank you. Now, those same parasites had been previously found in trout and frogs. Were they the cause of the man's malady? Or, if so, how had they been transmitted to the victim? Miss Baxter.
Via glycina morsitans.
Ah, yes, indeed. The fancy Latin term for the ubiquitous tsetse fly. So, now we have the cause. The specific microbe. Search for a treatment begins. It's a thrilling time to be in medicine. Cures will be found and deadly diseases eradicated in your lifetime, ladies. Though in the meantime, I suggest you stay away from the tsetse fly.
Professor Hempel, our final exam results?
I believe they will be posted tomorrow. Now, good day.
Drowned? That's truly, truly awful.
Poor Sarah.
You were both in the same study group, weren't you? Yes, we spent hours together. Was she upset about something that would give her cause to take her own life? Nothing at all. Has to be some kind of accident.
She was graduating, starting work with Professor Hempel, lucky thing. Why kill herself?
I know. I feel the same way.
Maybe it has something to do with her beau.
I wouldn't call him a beau.
Who is he? His name is...
We shouldn't say anything, Anne.
Why not?
Sarah was very private.
She's dead. It's a bit late for secrets.
All right, then. His name's Bernard Winston. He's a medical student in his final year.
Just a second, who are you again? You were a friend of Sarah's. I still can't believe it. We were supposed to have supper at my hall last night, but she didn't show up.
Did you get into an argument? Was she upset about something?
What do you mean? You think I had something to do with this?
I'm just trying to understand what happened, Mr. Winston. How long had you known her?
We met at the inauguration of the new medical building in October. Right off the bat, her intelligence shone through.
You were attracted to her brain? That's novel.
My father pushed me into medical school, but I'm more cut out for the cricket pitch than study hall. I would have been out on my ear months ago without Sarah's help.
Sounds like you owe her a lot.
It wasn't all work. Our knowledge of anatomy wasn't purely academic. She was happy, Miss James. Excited about the future.
I talked to her friends, and no one can fathom Sarah taking her own life.
The suicide of someone close can be hard to comprehend. And the reason why Miss Franklin made that choice is no doubt very complex. You may never have an answer.
But what if she didn't kill herself?
Miss James, without evidence of foul play, there's nothing we can do about it. You understand that, don't you? And let's turn our attention to what poison killed Mr. McGinnis. Ranch has proven unhelpful. Could you set up for the good site test?
And the science laboratory is to be at the end of this wing.
Yes, for my wife and myself.
I suppose she's behind the automated dishwashing cupboard.
Oh, actually, that's my idea. I have detailed specifications.
Which I have studied carefully, Detective Murdoch. No matter the peculiarities of the room contents, it's still a bricks and mortar construction for which I am well qualified.
Yes. From your prospectus, it's clear that you are thoroughly competent. Now, did you make note of these roof lines?
Unconventional but sound. Nothing that can't be constructed.
I've designed them this way so that rainwater can be collected, stored, and reused for irrigation. That is, until I install the internal cooling system that will work.
Can I ask when you'll be making a decision, Detective?
Oh, that could be years. The technology required for such a system is still in its infancy.
I mean, on which contractor you'll be using. There are a number of people considering my services.
Oh. Well, I'm sure you can appreciate this decision is considerable and not one to be made in haste. I will contact you in due time, Mr. Binks.
Detective Murdoch, Madam.
Patience is not a virtue amongst the city's contractors.
Isn't Mr. Binks the seventh man you've interviewed?
Yes, and he made the short list based on his budget parsimony. But I don't think he fully appreciates the intricacies of my design, Julia.
He doesn't need to appreciate it to build it, surely. Wasn't he a contractor on the King Edward Hotel?
Yes.
That hasn't fallen down yet.
That isn't the point.
Well, what is the point of a builder but to build? Don't add to that. I have the results from Mr. McGinnis. Arsenic poisoning. Likely administered by several small doses. The accumulation eventually killed him. He also found a purgative in his system.
That would explain the vomit that was found on his clothing.
An unsuccessful attempt to save him, perhaps? Do you have any suspects?
At this point, two. Wife and mistress.
Wife and mistress. Some motive there, surely?
Well, so you would think, but the arrangement seemed to suit all parties.
Terribly French. So, am I to assume that Mr. Binks is off your list?
We can do better, Julia.
Dr. Stogallen.
Yes, Miss James. How can I help you?
It's about Sarah Franklin.
Yes. I was very saddened to hear the news.
I just saw her exam result. I don't understand how she could fail.
I am equally mystified. Miss Franklin was one of our best students. She would have made an exceptional research scholar for Professor Hempel. She just needed to pass this exam.
Maybe there was some mistake. Perhaps her exam was muddled up with some other students.
There was no mistake, Miss James. This is what she handed in.
She didn't write a word.
Deliberately sabotaging her bright future.
Why would she do that?
I'm afraid she took the answer with her to the grave, Miss James.
Goodbye, Edward. Rest in peace.
I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Stone.
Thank you. Detective, I know you didn't have to allow this. I appreciate the courtesy.
I believe her grief is genuine.
It certainly seems so.
Julia, did you see her complexion? I noticed it the first time I met her. She seems overly pale.
Yes, she could be anemic. Though she was perspiring, and I also noted her odorous breath.
Is she ill?
Those are classic symptoms of mercury treatment.
Mercury's primary use is in the treatment of syphilis, huh?
Yes, it has limited results, but in the absence of a cure.
Julia, if Miss Stone is syphilitic, then there's every possibility that Mr. McGinnis was as well.
Anne, Catherine, Did you see Sarah's exam result? I couldn't believe it. Big fat 0.
That doesn't make any sense. Why would she do that if she already knew the...
Catherine. You're the one who said you didn't want to keep quiet. Don't be idiotic. Think of the consequences.
There are no consequences for me. I didn't believe her.
Believe what?
Well, the cat's out of the bag now. You might as well know. Sarah hadn't been pulling her weight in our study group. Stopped coming to classes, spent all of her time in the laboratory. She expected us to pick up the slack and give her our notes. When we got sick of doing her work, we tried to throw her out of the study group. Let her sink or swim, but she begged us not to. Swore up and down she'd make it up to us. And she did, too. How? The next time we saw her, she was very sure about the questions on the final exam. Told us exactly what to study. She was right and got a great mark. And you? Unfortunately, I didn't listen to her.
How did Sarah know the exam questions?
I think it has something to do with Bernard Winston.
Why?
He's no bright, shining light, but he scored top marks in the same exam at the men's college. How do you think he managed that?
I'll get back to you.
Is it our builder?
Mr. Cole? Perhaps. Though he did laugh at my notion of a standing bath.
So he has a sense of humor. Can't penalize him for that.
This is an important decision.
Yes, and one that must be made soon.
I won't place our home into the wrong hands.
Whose hands are the right hands?
I haven't found them yet.
Let's face it, William. You think you should build our house.
Me? No one man can do that.
Well, of course they can't.
Well, perhaps with the right crew, some competent craftsmen. Of course, you would have to have a very good foreman.
William! I was joking.
Oh.
Let's talk about this later. I've made an interesting discovery. Come to my office. Syphilis is a truly insidious disease. It can invade the nervous system at even the earliest stages. So to that end, I re-examined Mr. McGinnis and discovered he had ocular syphilis.
It was affecting his eyesight. So he would have known he was a carrier then.
Most likely.
Which would explain why he stayed away from his wife and stopped seeing his mistress.
He was trying to be responsible.
A little too late for Miss Stone, however. He sentenced her to death, or at least madness.
Actually, there has been some scientific progress. 2 scientists from Germany, Fritz Schaudin and Erich Hoffmann, have identified the causative bacteria.
Treponema pallidum spirochete. But how to eradicate the bacteria without harming the patient?
That is the next scientific challenge. So you think syphilis plays a role in Mr. McGinnis's death?
Given his domestic arrangement, perhaps it does.
Mr. Winston,
What do you want now?
you cheated on your final exam.
Not here. What are you talking about?
Don't pretend you don't know. You stole the exam questions and gave them to Sarah. She threatened to expose you, didn't she?
You don't know what you're talking about.
She was going to tell, so you shut her up.
I didn't.
You threw her in the river.
You've got it all wrong, you silly fool.
Oh, you can tell that to the police.
I didn't give the exam to Sarah. She gave it to me.
What do you mean?
She told me what to study.
You're lying.
She knew the questions.
How?
I don't know. I didn't want to know. Oh, God. Are you gonna tell? Are you? Please, don't!
Miss James,
Detective,
what are you doing here?
I've been looking into Sarah Franklin's death.
Oh, Miss Franklin, the suicide?
I found something. Not that I should have been looking.
That's quite all right. What did you find?
I found an address in Sarah's locker.
RS 100 2040 Rose Hill Avenue.
I just discovered who lives there. Edward McInnes. I believe the two cases are connected.
I believe you're right. So, Miss Franklin had the exam in advance and shared it with Bernard Winston and the rest of her study group, but then handed in a blank exam?
Yes.
You think she was going to report the cheating?
How else to explain the blank exam?
And none of this explains why Sarah had the address of a murdered businessman in her locker.
Perhaps Sarah was Mr. McInnes's new mistress.
You think she killed him for whatever reason and then took her own life?
Or perhaps someone killed them both.
Now, this is the woman in question.
Well, Miss James, I must commend your initiative.
Really? Oh, I'm so relieved. I thought you'd be more disapproving.
Oh, heavens no. An inquisitive mind must be encouraged.
Thank you, Mrs. McInnes. The victim's wife confirms that Miss Franklin did indeed come to the home looking for Mr. McInnes the day after he died. She also noted that Miss Franklin seemed distraught, though she had no idea why.
Perhaps there's more to learn at the medical school. Dr. Stowe Gullen may be helpful.
Precisely where I'm headed now.
May I ride with you, Detective? I have an assignment to finish and hand in.
Of course.
Miss Franklin was a most meticulous student, though happier in the lab than the classroom.
What was her field of study?
She wanted to work on identifying compounds to combat bacterial disease.
Oh, that's a very new field. I admire her ambition.
She was to be a research scholar for our esteemed Professor Hempel. Of all the students in the country, he chose our Miss Franklin. I was so proud of her. She will be sorely missed.
I would like to speak with this Professor Hempel.
Of course.
Miss Franklin had a burning curiosity. Not unlike a detective, I suppose. Now, that distinguished her, that as well as her ambition.
Yes, the study of bacteria.
She was dedicated to the long-term pursuit of Atherapia sterilisans magna, a treatment that manages to kill harmful bacteria without causing any damage to a patient's healthy cells. Magic in a bottle, I called it. It's a bit of a dream, actually, but that wasn't going to stop her.
This your work?
Yes, I'm researching African sleeping sickness. I'm just a rank amateur compared to my European colleagues, but I'm keen to find a way to protect the brave missionaries working on the Dark Continent. Miss Franklin couldn't wait to start working with me.
Did she seem distressed lately?
Not at all. That is why this has been such a terrible shock.
Yes. Why destroy her future by deliberately sabotaging her final exam?
I have no idea. I can only guess she had some sort of a breakdown. Melancholia is often the companion of genius.
Do you know the exam questions in advance?
Oh, good Lord, no. It's a province-wide affair, tightly guarded, I gather.
Of course, of course. Did Miss Franklin ever mention a Mr. McInnes to you?
McInnes? No, I don't recognize the name.
Thank you for your time, Professor.
Julia, have a look at this. Some of Miss Franklin's research. She had been working with arsenic.
Do you think she had something to do with Mr. McGinnis's death?
She had the means. She could be the killer.
But what's her connection? She wasn't intimate with him. Or if she was, she wasn't infected. I re-examined her. William, this research. Miss Franklin wasn't working with pure arsenic. She was using arsenic compounds. We know arsenic kills, but when...
In combination with other elements, could also cure.
Exactly. Some of these formulas are very sophisticated.
She had been using rats as test subjects.
With some success.
Julia, what if she was onto something?
Here it is. Miss Franklin was trying to eradicate this nasty-looking thing.
Trypanosome.
Spiral-shaped parasite that causes sleeping sickness.
Oh, that makes sense. Miss Franklin had begun working with Professor Hempel. He is researching sleeping sickness. Julia, this illustration reminds me of... Oh, yes.
Where are you going?
The research journal you were showing me only yesterday.
What of it?
The causal agent for syphilis. Here it is. They look quite similar.
They do. In fact, the scientists who discovered the syphilis bacteria made the same observation.
Could the treatment for one also treat the other?
You think the professor and Miss Franklin were researching syphilis as well as sleeping sickness?
But if so, why not tell me?
Well, any breakthrough in the cure for syphilis would be an enormous scientific coup. It's the stuff of Nobel Prizes. It would relieve the suffering of millions.
So they kept their work a secret. Julia, the compounds that Miss Franklin had been working with, could they be lethal if given in frequent doses?
What are you thinking?
Perhaps Miss Franklin's rats were not enough. They needed a human subject.
What are you doing in here?
I'm just a cleaner, sir. I am almost finished.
Well, hurry it up. I have a lot of work to do.
Yes, sir.
Haven't I? Yes, I have seen you before. You're no cleaner. You're that new student in second year, the special case. What are you doing in my office?
Nothing.
What are you looking for? Answer me, girl! I know you're in here. I just want to talk to you. Now, young lady, what were you doing in my office? Wouldn't want to see you expelled from the college.
I know about Sarah. And about the cheating on the final exam.
We had important work to do. She had to pass.
You gave her the questions.
If I hadn't, she was going to fail, so yes, what of it? Is that what you were looking for? Planning a little cheating yourself, were you?
What papers were you burning?
Who are you?
What does RS-100 mean?
What's your name?
Rebecca James.
Well, Miss James, you must be quite a bright thing to be accepted into the college. Perhaps we can come to an agreement.
What does that mean?
I'll need a new research assistant. You could step into Miss Franklin's shoes. Are you interested? No, you don't.
Detective Murdoch.
Mr. Desmond,
I'm sure glad to see you, Detective.
is everything all right?
I'm looking for Rebecca. Now, we were supposed to meet her at the church social, but she didn't show up. Now, that's not like her.
No, it's not.
I'll let you in on a little secret. I am on the verge of a major discovery that you could be a part of. Miss Franklin would be proud of you. Another woman entering the field.
You stole Sarah Franklin's work.
Is that what she told you?
She didn't tell me anything.
She was no angel. She had more than enough reason to take her own life.
Oh, my God. Where is she? Rebecca! Rebecca, are you here?
Don't make a sound. Detective, I'm very pleased to see you. I caught this woman rifling through my office. I want her arrested for burglary and assault.
Professor, take your hands off Miss James this instant.
If you say, Detective.
You all right, Becca?
Detective, he gave Sarah the exam. And he stole her work.
I'm afraid your Miss James has some cockeyed notion about her friend. Now, Why are you here, Detective?
Well, Professor, since we last spoke, I've looked a little further into your research. In particular, the similarities between the causal agents of syphilis and sleeping sickness.
Well, you have done your homework.
Did you know Edward McInnes?
No.
Was he RS 100?
RS. I believe that was Miss Franklin's coding system. I hate to speak ill of the dead.
Go on.
She had her lab rats, but she talked about needing a human subject.
So Miss Franklin knew Mr. McInnes.
If he was RS 100, yes, I think she did.
He's lying. He's the one who treated Mr. McInnes.
Don't be ridiculous.
I can prove it. This was in his fireplace, sir. Pieces of Mr. McInnes' medical records. Professor Hempel was treating him. He was burning the evidence.
Detective, she came to me and confessed what she had done. I was merely trying to help.
You gave him the purgative.
Yes, I tried to save him, but it was too late.
Sarah didn't give a patient an unproven formula. She would never do that.
You didn't know her.
Professor, you're coming with me. Miss James was right. Sarah Franklin did not kill Mr. McInnes. She'd gone to his home to find him the day after he died. Had she learned that you'd been using her formulas?
Sarah Franklin wasn't a saint.
What does that mean?
I learned of the similarities between the agents for sleeping sickness and syphilis. When I saw the progress Sarah was making on arsenical compounds, I proposed we work together. She was excited at the prospect, and she gave me her formula.
What of Mr. McInnes?
Well, he had done his own research. He knew the syphilis bacteria had been identified, so he came to me begging for help. He was fully aware of the risks.
So you began treating him with Miss Franklin's arsenic compounds. Did she know about this?
Yes. She was as ambitious as I. Then a few weeks into the treatment, her lab rats started to die. She tried adjusting the arsenic levels in the compound, but it was too late. The damage was done.
And Mr. McInnes began dying as well.
He was desperate.
Of course he was. You were the doctor, the scientist. You should have urged caution.
Don't be naive, Detective. You think progress is made without risk, without intuitive leaps. That's what separates great minds from the ordinary.
And that's what you saw in Sarah Franklin. A great mind, a risk taker.
I did, but I was wrong. She was weak. She couldn't cope with her failure, and she suffered the consequences at her own hand.
You put a dying man in his own car, drove him to a remote area, and left him there to be found by a night watchman. You're under arrest for the murder of Edward McInnes.
You let Sarah Franklin think it was all her fault.
Miss James.
Well, it was her compound.
That you administered to Edward McInnes.
Medical research is a demanding field, my dear. I've often wondered if the fair sex is up to the challenge. Well, given the empirical evidence of Sarah Franklin, seems they're not.
All right, that's enough, Professor. Take him.
He's wrong, Detective.
Yes, Miss James. He is wrong.
Well, it's been an exciting week at the college. Oh, Miss James is quite a pistol.
Yes, I believe she's coming into her own. I hope the moor can contain her energy.
I'm sure you'll find a way. Julie, I have a proposal. I'm setting up a course in forensic medicine, and I want you to teach it.
Me?
I think you'd be a wonderful example for our students to emulate.
Oh, that's very flattering. But I must warn you, the research methods I'd like to pursue might be somewhat unorthodox.
That doesn't trouble me. Medical research is still uncharted territory. There is no progress without ruffling a few feathers.
Then I'd be delighted to stir up some controversy.
I can always count on you.
All right, wait. Since you missed the party, Becca, come in. Now, what got into you anyway? Poking around some white man's study when you could have been living it up at the church social.
I could have bested him,
Really?
but it was good to see you there.
Maybe it's time for you to put that moonlight detective work on the back burner, Becca.
Says who?
Says me.
Really?
Admit it. You need protection.
Admit it. You're envious.
You know we make a good team.
Oh, you think so, do you? When are you gonna give that up?
When are you gonna give it up?
Patience, Mr. Desmond. I promise. It will be worth the wait.